What is happening, superfans? You're listening to Behind the Mask, the show where we chat with your favorite superhero fiction authors about the worlds and the heroes that they are writing. Behind the Mask is brought to you by superherofiction.com, the world's largest website dedicated to superhero fiction. I am your host, Franklin Kendrick, and today on the show, I am pleased to be talking with somebody that you may recognize from the internet, Jeremy Flagg. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's been all of 2 weeks since I did this.
Yes, in different roles, but now you're back. You just, couldn't get enough.
Now I'm on the right-hand side of the screen.
Yes, I just switched the text over. It was really dramatic.
Yeah, now I can't screw up the introduction, so...
There you go.
Yeah, I'll find a way, don't worry.
There's plenty of questions to, stumble over and be like, what did I write? Did I do this?
And I already told Franklin I've already forgotten everything I asked last time, so it's going to be like the first time I ever did it all over again.
So this is like live theater for all the listeners.
I was that person in drama that never memorized their lines.
Oh, well, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Well, we'll start with the easiest question, the first question, which is a classic. When you're not a superhero behind the keyboard working on your superhero fiction and all the other stories, who are you? What is your secret identity out there in the real world?
Weirdly enough, I'm kind of a Clark Kent situation. Everyone out in the world knows me as Remy Flagg, not Jeremy. So I go by a pen name in real life. I know, it's super mysterious. Yeah, by day I'm a teacher, I guess. I'm on hiatus at the moment thanks to the lovely world of COVID, but I teach high school art. I teach graduate level creative writing, and as different could be. And as of late, I've been kind of leaning more into the graphic design stuff, and I decided, why not? I don't have enough on my plate. Let's open a book cover business and, put some of those degrees to use finally.
Now is the time.
Yeah, I've got a lot of free time now. I'm from northern Maine. I'm used to being a hermit to begin with, and now like COVID happened and everyone's like, oh, it's horrible, we have to stay inside. And I was like, oh, now I don't have to make up excuses.
Yeah, it's such a weird, it's all in the head. I feel like the only thing that bothers me is that certain things that I used to do that would like recharge my creativity, it's just not feasible to do it right now. So like going out places, people watching, like all the stuff you just can't do. So it's like, oh wow, like I'll just suck it up until
I want Chinese food. Like,
yeah, like I want to go out to a place and not be terrified for my life.
The one Chinese food place near me, like they held on as long as they could, but they're closed until everything kind of returns to kind of normal. Every time I drive by, I'm like, your food was horrible, but I want it so much.
Yeah, you don't know what you got till it's gone.
But yeah, when COVID hit, I mean, I teach graduate school online, and I've been doing that for many years. So when the high school position went online, I was like, oh, well, nothing really changes. I just don't have a commute anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I wrapped that up because they're returning to school. So I'm out for the rest of the year. And I figure while I'm out, I might as well do the cover business. And, superhero authors have really crappy covers. So let's start making them.
Oh, yes. And I've seen, for the listeners out there, I've seen some of the stuff that has been put together, and it is pretty good, I gotta say. So I'm sure you'll see them around. If they're not already out, I know you've mentioned that you've got a lot of commissions where stuff isn't going to be done till later in the year, but you're like, yep, here's your cover. It's all ready to go. So that's a good sign.
I'm just waiting. Hurry up and release your book, authors. I want to share pictures with the world.
Yeah, the tension of waiting as a creator. I even just like writing something and then knowing that you have to hold on to it for whatever reason is terrible. But then something as visual as a cover is like, oh no, it was so easy to just share it, but you can't.
It's you bought that perfect Christmas present for somebody in August, but now you have to wait until Christmas.
Yep, it's going to stay in the drawer, buried underneath some crap paperwork so that no one goes digging.
And let me just tell you, I'm more of like, I bought you this Christmas gift. It's only October. I know, I waited as long as I could.
I got it inside from the car.
It's either that or I'm going to start giving hints and be like, well, it's something like this. Like either just open it or I'm going to give it away. Either way, I can't wait. Yeah, my mother would be super proud.
Well, on the other side of things, this is a question that's in between. So between doing cover design and then writing books, which one would you say is more stressful?
Oh, I don't know. I'm kind of a jerk boss to myself. The writing, one of them is always more stressful than the other because I feel like today the writing just it flowed from my fingertips. I just want to keep. Oh no, gotta stop. Gotta go to the other job now. And then as you're designing, you're like, that book could be being written right now, but no, I have to do this. And then sometimes it's the other way where you sit at the computer to start writing, and you're just like, I want every character to die. All of you, you're all horrible. And I'm gonna scrap this whole book if you don't work for me. So it seems to be that if one of them's difficult, the other one I will compensate. Sometimes I write an easier scene, or sometimes I go for the low-hanging fruit on a book cover. Like I know, like certain genres just have formulas that are much easier to follow. So when I'm having a stressful day, I'll be like, okay, this is gonna be an easy cover day. We're just gonna make it happen. So I try to balance them, but it's like two best friends. I love them both, but they hate each other. So
that's a good description.
They're so difficult.
Well, my next question is specifically about the writing portion. What got you into writing in the first place in your writing journey? And then what got you interested in working in the superhero fiction genre?
Okay, so in 2006, I was at a job that was going south fast. It was a teaching gig. I didn't like it. My boss was a miserable human being, and therefore my life was miserable. And the students were just a bunch of spoiled brats. And I love teaching. I love working with kids. I don't like the adults so much, but I guess gotta. So even when I found myself like looking at the kids being like, no, I was like, I need an outlet for this. So I decided I was gonna start. I at the time I was kind of keeping like a funny list of weird things they said because they're horribly vulgar and you're not allowed to giggle in front of them, so you have to save it for later. And then randomly, like I don't know why it popped up on wherever I was at the time. NaNoWriMo showed up, and I was like, oh, 50,000 words. That's a novel. Okay. 30 days. Like, oh, I think I can do that. And so I sat down and my first love is always going to be zombies. There's something stupid fun about them. I have seen literally every zombie movie. It doesn't matter how bad or how many musical numbers, I have seen it. And so I was like, you know what? If I unleashed zombies in this school, these kids would be screwed. And so when you're a teacher, you can't kill kids, like it's frowned upon.
Yes.
And so, however, in a fiction novel, you can have them devoured and no one will ever know.
Yes.
So on my lunch breaks, I had to be in the library for library duty, and so I just spent the time writing, and it wound up being it's called Suburban Zombie High. It's a horribly slapstick, like outlandish. I always tell people it's like Scooby-Doo meets The Walking Dead. Um, it's vulgar, it's over the top, it's every cliche and stereotype that we all remember from high school, and I let them get eaten by zombies.
Does
So
anybody survive? Does anybody live to the end?
yes, because there has to be a sequel, of course.
Okay.
And there are actual students in the book. The librarian, who was a dear friend, her name was Miss V, Miss Voorhees, and I didn't even try and hide it. She is the librarian in the book, and she used to tell me stories about how before she was a teacher, she worked in the traveling circus on the High Wire Act, and she worked for NASCAR in the pit crew, and she was a gold medal marksman, and she shot competitively. And so I was like, this woman will survive the zombie apocalypse. Like, and so she does, and she leads a band of misfit kids to over the top hilarity, I guess. And then it kind of just kept going from that. And I published the first book not edited. I didn't do anything. I barely knew how to write a full sentence. And I looked at my dashboard one day and I was like, people are buying this. Who the hell are these people? And I wound up meeting another author, Chris Philbrook, at a like a local little mini con thing. And he's there selling his zombie books, and he's a full-time author. He makes a living off this. And I was like, hi, my name is Jeremy Flagg. I wrote a zombie book too. And I'm sure he was like, oh, one of those. But I persisted and we became friends. And so the Suburban Zombie High trilogy came out, and it was the first series of books. Which, if you read between the lines, it might be autobiographical of my teaching career. Unless the police are asking, then it's completely made up.
The kids are all out there somewhere unless they have killed each other.
Yeah. and I never ever do anything bad to a student on the page, which made it really creative because not a whole lot of them survive. And then my parents were moving out of their house one time, and my dad's like, do you want all these old notebooks and stuff? And I'm like, sure, I'll look through them. And in middle school, my best friend and I worked on a comic book together called Nighthawks, or the Hawks, or something like that. And it was just, it was X-Men fanfic basically. And he did all the art because I have no drawing bone in my body. And I was like, oh, I'll write all the scripts for them. And so we did that. And I remember we hit issue 100 on it.
Oh, wow.
And there were spin-offs and there were crossover events, and it got time consuming. And so never ever did anything with them. And so I found in one of the notebooks one of his original drawings for one of my heroes, and I found a page of the script, and I was like, "Oh God, this is bad." It was exactly what a seventh grader would do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started thinking about it, and I was like, I could do superheroes. I love comics. I literally know everything there is to know about them. I Yeah, why not? And I was like, I already have a plot, kinda. Okay, well, what if we aged it up? What if we made it a little more pseudoscience can explain everything? What if we and it just became a whole lot of what if I tweaked this and this and this? And it was, I think, 2011 when I wrote it or started writing it. And then I scrapped the whole first draft because it was bad. And then 2012 comes around and I patiently waited the apocalypse again. Zombie obsession. I was there for it. And then it dawned on me, I was like, what if 2012 it wasn't the apocalypse, but the end of the world as we know it? And Nostradamus was actually one of the first people actually able to predict the future. And then all of a sudden it just happened. And I would say 2 months later, I'm shopping for a publisher. So, and now I'm 5, 8, 9, 8 finished books, 2 on the table, in a short story and novella. So and there's no end in sight. Like I've mapped this out for a while. But I love action adventure movies. I love science fiction, and that's why my heroes lean more into kind of the science realm, and it's slightly in the future, so it's tech. It was the story I wanted when I was a kid. So at least I would.
Yeah. That's usually, I think, the best way to go about it is, anybody listening out there, if there's a story out there, and in our case, in the superhero realm, that you want that no one has done, go for it, because it's easy enough that you won't be copying something because it's something that you haven't found. So it'll give you greater determination. That's how a lot of people that have been on the show have started out, where they'll say, yeah, I never saw superhero stories about like older people, so I decided I'm going to do this. So,
and like, I was always a huge fan of Chris Claremont's Days of Future Past. Like, if you read my novel, you'll instantly be like, yep, he read that. I don't try and disguise it one bit. Matter of fact, Chris Claremont, if you're listening, because I know you are, I'll send you a signed copy. But it was Days of Future Past was 2 issues, and that was it. And at the time, they had done Days of Past Future and all these horrible, like, trying to recreate his magic. And I was like, no, all I want is 100 more issues of that same story. Like, how hard is this to figure out? So I wrote it.
And then the proof is on the page. Yeah. It's there. It's ready to be devoured.
And the story I'm working on right now is actually probably even closer to it as far as the tone and the feel of it. The first one, I was just, let's beat up all my characters and see how many of them survive. Not a whole lot of them, just saying.
Well, it's like you gotta weed them out somehow.
Once you nuked New England and Boston and New York City, like, really just one death didn't seem a big deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm in the genre for a while. I'm actually staying in the superhero genre on all the books I'm writing, but I'm pulling other subgenres in. So
Mhm.
My first books were action adventure, then I did alt history, and now the ones I'm writing now are much more rooted in science fiction. So, and eventually there'll be a superhero smutty romance in there, and maybe I'll find a way to work magic. I don't know. I have a space opera series. I just need to rationalize it in one of my books, and I can get
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
soon.
Yes.
I
So
need
for your superhero stuff, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you have two different? Is there a you have a mainline series and then do you have a spin-off series?
so okay, so lesson for anyone who's listening, don't make an awesome character in your prologue and then kill them off in the
Mhm.
prologue. The fans get a little miffed. But the prologue for my book is there's a psychic. She works in the White House and she helps the president, make executive decisions because she can see the future and she sees all the possibilities at once and she can help navigate the choices that will get you from point A to point B. And as she's like an 86-year-old woman and she knows something is wrong and she can't quite put her finger on it. And so she's going to a meeting with the president. And before she goes, she asks one of the pages if he can deliver all of these letters that she's written. And he says, like, is it true you can really see the future? And he basically his mom is about to die from cancer, and she tells him, your mom's going to be okay. She'll see the birth of your first child. And so he agrees to it, and he runs off the page, and he was supposed to never be seen again. And when she goes to meet with the president, she finally calls out the president like, hey, there's something weird about you. And when the president kind of, says, well, you found me out, and she pulls a gun and tries to kill the president because she's seen this all before. Um,
Oh.
and she knows she's going to die. She's known since she was a little girl that that's how she would die. So um, she fulfills her destiny. Well, the letters that she sends out actually go to all these people who will someday have powers. And these people were never meant to meet. And by sending these letters, she repositioned their trajectory so their paths start to cross. And what she's been doing is she knows this horrible thing is coming, and the only way for the best bet to beat it is to align these futures. And so I play a lot with the question of, do we have free will or is fate predetermined? And then it starts into a very traditional superhero dystopian series. Well, I pulled my readers. Oh, I have this Academy story I'm thinking about, or I have this space opera. And they're all like, no, we want more of her. And I was like, she's dead. Like, I'm not going to be that superhero author that keeps bringing back dead people. She was 86.
Yes.
So I write her origin story, and it starts when she's a little girl, and it goes up until she first meets the organization that has been kind of lurking in the background, and you only loosely hear about them in the first series. And she has a much sinister past. She's not as sagely and, that beautiful grandmother that you wish you had. She's a little bit of a firecracker, and she makes some bad choices. So I did a trilogy for her, and there's another trilogy that will eventually get written that bridges the gap between them. I'm not not ready to be mean to her.
Let it sit for a little bit.
And like, if you read the first series, you know how she dies. And so I wanted to make it really clear to the readers for that one. She has her first vision where in the first couple of pages of the book where she sees her own death. And the idea was, how would you live your life if you knew the exact time and moment that you died? And so, like, superheroes let you play with those big questions that you couldn't possibly answer. Now, the series I'm working on now is, they're not the kids of the first team, but they're like the up and coming generation. And you know, what would superhero 20 somethings be like if they were the second generation of people? They're a bunch of brats.
Entitled.
Yeah. They don't understand just how good they got it. I almost wrote a uphill both ways line in there. I was like, no, I can't.
Oh, no.
I'm my father. So
as much as you want to.
But the origin story one, I needed a way to drastically alter history to misalign, because eventually my books, you know, they take place in 2032. They're going to happen. So I needed to alter the timeline enough. So I kill Hitler off schedule. Why not? And from there on out, history no longer follows the course that we know it. So I awarded myself a lot of liberties when I did that.
Nice. So for your heroes, this is kind of like an altered version of my next question. You mentioned the one that is the fan favorite. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the others, and how do they get their powers? Is it a plot point twist, or is it like something that you're able to talk about without spoiling everything?
Oh no, I don't explain it.
Oh, it's just there.
And I leave it as a scientific mystery very intentionally, because one, I don't want to explain it. I don't know how to even pseudoscience my way into this conversation. But the way my world works is there's essentially three types of people. There's either humans, mentalists, who they control things with their minds and they completely and utterly defy science, which makes them far more terrifying, because at least, you know, a dude who wields lightning, like, he's got an internal battery that will run out, but someone who can possess your body is kind of unstoppable.
Yeah.
And then I have the superheroes, who they're called the Children of Nostradamus. And the reason for that is Nostradamus predicted that they would exist. And supposedly Nostradamus is the first psychic to ever be recorded. And then those people just get powers. It starts in 2012. Some of them are just born with them. Some of them emerge in weird times. There's no rhyme or reason as to how they manifest. And I did that so that I could have different ages, and I could have ethnicities all over the globe. But I do try to keep the majority of my powers to scientifically explainable phenomena. My main character, Confin, he teleports. He basically rips open a black hole in space-time. He is my Superman character. It can scientifically be explained, but not possible.
Yeah.
But then I have, you know, a dude who wields lightning, and I use the same science from electric eels, and someone who can generate plasma, which is a little close to Superman, but we scientifically could explain it by the amount of heat her body creates. I have a character who she has visual mimicry, and so it takes 1,000 hours to be a master at something. Well, she can see it once, and the first time she does it, her body just remembers. So she's a great fighter. She adapts to everyone very quickly. Plays the piano in her free time just because she can. um, and then I have the weird character, Vanessa, who is kind of like, I don't want to say the leader. She's not quite Professor X because she is way happy to get her hands dirty. But she's super reserved because she grew up in a very violent situation. But she is a mentalist and a child of Nostradamus.
Oh.
And everyone refers to her as the angel of the outlands because you can't, radiation in New England, you can't live there, but they can. And she makes everyone see her as an angel. And she had a religious upbringing, and it keeps the people at bay because they don't want to, go after angels.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, like, she's very serpentine, and she looks much more like a demon, and so there's a lot of her having to cope with that. But she can't fly; she can glide. Because I looked up what the wingspan would have to be, and that's not quite realistic. And then and I try to pull all of these from things that kind of sort of exist, so I don't have to explain a lot. A lot of people with Asperger's have like strong mathematics skills, and
Mm-hmm.
they tend to have more heightened mathematical computation. So one of my characters, who happens to have Asperger's, also has the ability to predict probabilities based on available information, and he's kind of a human computer at this point.
Oh.
And so, like, I kind of just took things that already existed and dialed them up, which is problematic when you're building an expanding universe because I used up all the good ones. Like I'm getting weird. My character just bumped into someone whose skin, instead of excreting sweat, excretes acid.
Oh.
Like, oh, okay, it's a real thing. There are animals that do it. So, like, I'm pulling from the animal kingdom all over the place. A person who has no stomach and uses photosynthesis, and okay, they're cool powers for background characters, but I'm not sure anyone wants to read a book about a person who can eat sunlight.
Oh, I don't know. You never know. There will be someone who'll be like, "This is so fresh."
There's a subgenre out there just calling for plant men.
Oh yes.
So yeah, and when I asked my readers, I was like, okay, so I kind of have the second generation of people coming up. Would you be okay if, like, they could fly without explanation? And my readers absolutely shot it down. They're like, if we wanted that, we could read other books. We like the fact that you explain things. And I'm like, crap.
Mm.
So a buddy of mine is a paramedic, and does a lot with, like, cardiology. So I was like, okay, I need to talk to you about superpowers. Like, I've been reading about metabolism and these things, and I don't understand them. And there's diagrams. And so he actually walked me through, like, hundreds of possibilities.
Oh wow.
I just will need someone to check my science. Um, Like he's probably going to get a footnote at this rate. So, but it's fun, and it keeps me from ever making a character who is too strong. Because if there's no fight, then there's no stakes, and then okay, that's boring.
Yeah. Well, speaking of fights, what about villains in your universe? Can you talk about any of them, if there even are specific villains?
So in my first series, I was so the villain in the first book is a prison warden who oversees the facility that where they send, because at this point children are being captured for their own protection, of course, but
of course
they're vanishing to this place that it was supposed to be like a learn how to use your powers, but no one is ever seen again from there. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to make him a mentalist, because they're really hated in my world right now, because they basically were called and murdered, and why not? Let's do it. And so that's all he was in the first book. He was just the closest thing I could think of to compare him to an X-Men is he's kind of the boogeyman, like Shadow King. Like he's kind of that, you don't quite get what's happening, because I always intended more books. And I wanted his story to very much come to an end of that iteration of what you knew, and not oh, he's back from the dead, but now we're seeing, oh shit, he wasn't done evolving into this horribleness that we feared. Like we only got the mini boss of the level. Now we see. And so I knew that was coming. And so when I made him, he was a good, solid, like just evil dude. And in my books, there's always 4 or 5 chapters that focus on the past. And it wasn't meant to exist. It was never part of the original outline, and I didn't intend to write it, but my book came in a little bit short, and I was like, there's some questions I want to elaborate on, and this is the best way to do it. And so these past chapters actually focus on the page that delivered all the letters.
Okay.
And in the first book, you're like, okay, I get why, and he provides a little enrichment, but okay, he's a little oddly placed in the story. And then book 2, 3, and 4 happen, and I have waited 4 books to take you on this roller coaster of a ride to say, told you so. So my villain starts off villainous. Like you don't get enough backstory to fully realize it, but as it gets fully realized, like I really liked my villain by the end. And as it expands, like you start to see like, oh, maybe the bad guy wasn't the bad guy. Maybe the psychic who made all of this happen. Like I wanted people to call into question. One of my favorite movies of all time is Matrix. And I know everyone hates Matrix 3, but at the end of the story, the villain wasn't the Matrix, it was the Oracle.
Oh yeah, for setting everything in motion.
She put it into motion knowing exactly how it would end. And then is she the villain because she was bound by her programming? Like I love that circular thinking, and I was like, let's do this. And so by the end, like full circles have happened all over the place. I've connected plot to A to B to C, and it required a lot more work than I think a typical story would. But now all of my books have a built-in past component. I have special tracking software on my computer that monitors my timelines for me. Because why? Someone go back into the past and tell me not to do this. Just
yeah, once you get past a certain point, you just need some way to track it all. Like there's no way that stuff that you come up with will just stay in your brain like perpetually. Like, it's got to be written down somewhere or kept track of, because the thought of going back and rereading your own books, I'm sure there's some people that really enjoy reading their own stuff. I do not, because it's such a slog, because you've already done it all and it was exciting the first couple times, and then you're like, no, I really don't want. Why didn't I write down this important piece of information that I should have known I would go to? So,
and like, because the main plot happens in 2032, but the past plot happens in 1992. Mm-hmm. But I've written another book that takes place in the middle of those two, so I have to make sure that that present plot works with the other past. Like it literally just, I just watch it all do this, and I'm like, why? But stop it.
Because it had to be complex. That's just the way
Complex or complicated. I'm not entirely sure what side of the fence I'm on. I don't know why.
Well, my next question can tie into the complexities or the complicatedness. You sort of touched on it earlier, but for the world, I know you said it's like partly alternate history and then also futuristic. How can you give us sort of like an overall tour of what your world is like, and maybe since it's sort of based on partial history and your changed future, like how did you pick and choose what you wanted to include and what you wanted to change?
So I needed an event large enough to disrupt the modern timeline. And originally, I wrote the alt history, the first book. I wrote it years ago, except I put it in the wrong decade. I got my math wrong, and I made it in the 60s. And the big event was going to be JFK's death. And then after doing way too much research into JFK, if he had lived, nothing would have changed.
Yeah.
His foreign policy was the same. And I don't know why I know so much about JFK now, but I did out the math and I was like, crap, it's supposed to take place not in the 60s, but in the 40s. And it's supposed to be like 1942 to 45. Well, crap, it's not like I can just casually toss in, take out flower children and put in World War II. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, so if it's going to be during World War II, the easiest event I could alter would be the actual war. And I was like, okay, do I want her story to take her overseas and she's actually involved in the war? And that's not my strength. I would have mangled history so abysmal, which is why I wanted to derail it. Mm-hmm. So through a series of events, it's her first time like manipulating the world at large. And in the first books, she can see the future, but she can't change it. That is, mm-hmm. She's very much it's not Persephone, is it Andromeda? Whatever Greek person can predict the future, but no one believes it. And so
yeah.
I should know. Oh, Cassandra.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In my book, I should know this stuff. And so I didn't want her to have the ability to change the future because how do you write an entertaining story where they know the outcome of everything? So she's fighting with that situation, and she's basically she lives history twice. So the first time that she starts to notice that things are shifting slightly, she decides to go, balls to the wall, and she's like, let's kill Hitler. So she manages to see a scenario in which the US intercedes with the Allied powers, and through Hitler's girlfriend, she kills him.
Oh.
So, like, I had to do really weird research into that. But, and that's where the major thing happens. And then Eleanor Roosevelt gets involved later on, and all these people with psychic abilities are now outed, and they now become part of the common knowledge. And so that happens, and then the next major event is she tries to kill the president in 1992 and doesn't succeed, and in retaliation, they kill all the people with psychic powers. And in retaliation, a whole bunch of nuclear reactors go off in the US. So I disrupted the timeline enough that I could fudge things, and I created like a no man's land where I could have things happen that I didn't have to research, like street signs or population numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, from there on out, it's very similar to reality. So you could be like, oh yeah, what would happen if Hitler died? Well, okay, this isn't too far fetched. So
yeah,
I wanted to rely heavily on what people already know instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. So I picked my key moments.
Yes, it's like just enough, because really the readers, if you're reading a book, I mean, I would hope that you're intelligent enough to be like, yeah, we have collective memory of history, at least like the broad strokes. So it's like there. The hard part, I hate it when a book does basically what you said, where it tries so hard to redo everything that it just becomes so confusing that you're like, I really don't even know what's going on. And like the stuff that you want as a writer to be really impactful is like too convoluted, where it like it doesn't land well, and it's like, oh no. That's the type of alternate history that I'm like, no, just pull it back just a couple degrees.
And like the whole JFK thing, like I thought if JFK lived, the whole world would be a different place. We'd have flying cars by now. And after reading like so many scholarly things about it, they're like, yeah, basically everything he wanted to have happen kind of happened. We all went into mourning, but nothing would have changed. Oh, yeah. So I would have had to drastically explain myself. And if I just said Hitler got killed early, everyone goes, oh.
Yeah, because like it really was that big of a thing that it would have like great changes in the way everything goes.
Yeah, and I didn't want to focus on those massive events, because my story, especially that story, it's contained to a few city blocks. So like it just would have been out of scope, but it's an alt history, so you gotta alter it somehow.
Oh yes. So my next question for you is, what are some of the things that inspired you? I know you said that you would come up with some of the ideas for this a long time back, but what are some of the things that inspired you as you were coming up with this superhero like universe and like saga?
So I had to go to the ER for an ear infection, I think. I don't even know what. And my hospital is so slow. I was so miserable sitting there in the waiting room, and I couldn't hear anything. And thankfully, the closed caption on, and it was a documentary about Nostradamus's predictions.
Oh.
Well, this just seems too easy. Like, you answer some questions for me. Thank you. So that is probably the biggest thing. But one of the things, so I don't know like how much X-Men you read, but do you remember End Song? Or no, what was it? It's where Strife is the bad guy and Cable shows up and
Oh.
that whole thing.
Not very well.
So there's an issue after this major X-Men arc, and it's called End Song, and it's all about Jubilee and Professor X rollerblading. That's it. There is no action to be had. There is Jubilee, who just doesn't understand this old dude in all his weird ways that he never seems to explain. And she is just embracing being a kid, and he can walk from the aftermath of it. And she's like, do you want to go skating? And he's like, I don't know. And she's like, you try to take on the world every day and you're scared of roller skates. And it was such a human issue that the beauty of it was simply this old dude who's kind of a dick most of the time, and this kid not understanding, finding common ground. And I remember reading the editor's notes at the end where like, we've just had this big thing and we just needed a story to wrap up and remind people that these heroes are still human. And that was something that always stuck with me. And later on in Uncanny X-Men 302 is the death of Ilyana Rasputin, Colossus's little sister. And the issue is, it's traumatic. I still remember sitting in my room reading it and crying. And she dies, and it's, again, you see it through Jubilee's eyes because she doesn't understand what's happening and she doesn't know how to cope with it. She's a teenager, and she's in a room brooding when Jean Grey walks in, and they have a conversation. They're like, look, you take on alien races and you can't heal this poor sick girl. And they're like, behind all the masks and underneath the suits, we're just human. And that was, I can go through every battle or whatever, but those two issues were so important that when I was writing my books, it was a fine superhero story. It was very X-Men. And I when I went to go do my first edit, I was like, there's no humanity in it. And so I wrote in a character who was meant to die and refused. And she's a human who winds up kind of tagging along with these people. And she's there to remind them that your powers don't make you anything. Like, you have human problems, you deal with human situations. And I really wanted to make sure that this idea of humanity made it into the books. And it was time for her to die, and god damn it, she refused. She makes it to the last book, and just I tried to kill her so many times, and she wouldn't have it. Like, I'm pretty convinced she actually wrote the end of the book for me. But that was like one of my big inspirations. And the same thing goes for like a lot of sci-fi. Like, I love the movie Her.
Oh yeah.
And it has so little to do with the sci-fi-ness of it, but it's this beautiful character-driven story about a relationship that it just, wow. My all-time favorite sci-fi series is Sense8, and you know, they can all telepathically talk to each other, but it has so little. I mean, I guess it has everything to do with the plot, but really why you keep tuning in is because of these relationships that they're doing and these human things that you can just connect with. So
Oh yeah.
like, and that's why like transitioning to sci-fi for me at least is kind of hard, because you have to give the tech a little more precedence, and I want to make sure that it's a harmonious balance with characters and how they work in this world. So it's a balancing act, and literally as I'm writing, I'm like, oh no, the meter's going too far that direction, oh no, too far the other way.
Yes.
But I could sci-fi all day long, all of those weird relationshipy character driven plots all day long.
Oh yeah. I feel like the just to comment on the like the human aspect of the superheroes stories that you just talked about. I think that is something recently that a lot of mainstream stuff has just sort of like forgotten or ignored, because it's all about spectacle and it's all about like the weight of being a hero and oh my, and it's like really in the end sometimes we just watch these stories and these characters or we read about them because they're not really just their hero persona. They are like they have a family or they have obligations, and it's sort of like everybody in real life has multiple hats they wear, where like I'm one person around my family, I'm another person in my own living space, and then I'm like a third person at my work. So it's like, yeah, you find ways to balance, and that's what is to me relatable when you read some of these hero stories, and like especially the superhero fiction as novels, is it's easier to see their normal side, like their side when they're not like jumping around, because in books you have the luxury of like inner monologue and it's not annoying. So I love that, and I love that you put that into your work, because really I feel like we've seen it all as far as action, and it's like sometimes you're like, oh, I don't care that they're jumping around. What I care about is what is this poor hero's goals, and like why can't they accomplish this?
I try to summarize it like everyone sees Mission Impossible movies. Tom Cruise is a great Ethan whatever, I don't even know the name.
Yeah.
But do I care about who he is as a person? No.
No.
Now, exact same type of person, or loosely, go look at John Wick. John Wick is literally a whole movie about shooting people. But you know, the only thing I cared about was get revenge for your dog.
Yes. So, because we all would want to do it if it was us. So,
and a whole movie about killing people. And yet I still felt a human connection, because if that was my dog, I would do the same thing.
Oh yeah. And it's like same thing for the movie Taken, where it's like, yeah, he was a hitman, but he first was a husband, an ex-husband, and a father, where it's like, yep, I really just want him to save his family.
and I think, like, don't get me wrong, like, I like Matrix. Did I care about Neo? Oh, hells no. Not even a little bit.
I did in the first one. In the first one I did.
After that, I was like, okay, be done.
Yeah.
But I cared about the world building in that situation. And so, like, I I love movies. I watch them way too much. But it was definitely a situation of, okay, I like this from this movie, but I, I, I don't really enjoy movies a lot anymore because I'm too critical of them. But now, like, being able to watch superhero movies, I can look at, oh, that's why Thor Ragnarok was 1,000 times better than Dark World. No,
Yes.
duh.
Oh yeah.
I might be the only person who liked Dark World, but
I sat in a theater with a friend for that movie. Side note, and when Natalie Portman stupidly is reaching out to the floating red goop, I was like, "No, I can't believe they're making you do this. No, nobody in their right mind would do this." And then my friend is just like, "But they got to do something." And I'm like, "They should have given her better than this." But okay.
and now she gets to be Thor. It's finally coming around.
Like I hope it's justice for making her do all those terrible things in that sequel.
Oh god,
But
it was bad.
oh boy. Well, speaking of plot lines, I'll steer it into my next question for you, which is, do you have a favorite plot that you have come up with or that came to you as like a burst of inspiration, or is there a twist that you are particularly fond of that you think, oh man, this is like, I can't believe this came to me and I had to like jot it down immediately? Let's say I know it's a tough question because out of 8 books, it's like, what do you pick?
Okay, so I'm actually going to go with the most recent one I've written. So the story that I submitted for the superhero anthology.
Mhm.
So we got tasked with you need to write a romance story to go into this anthology, and it can be any level of heat you want. And I was like, oh, I don't mind writing romance and I don't mind writing sex scenes, but I would never ever call myself a romance author. So I was like, okay, I need 2 people to come together. That's the okay. Check, got that part. Why are they in a room together? What? Like why would they be vulnerable? Like, I'm not a super like feels person. Like, most people would call me stone cold. So I was like, I feel mushy explaining, like, and so what I ultimately decided was I don't want my heroes to be heroes. They don't want to be heroes. They hate the idea. And I was like, okay, I have a reluctant hero, I guess. And so I need these 2 people to be in a vulnerable state so they can get their groove on.
Mhm.
And everything felt so divisive that I was like, oh God, like this is making me feel gross. And not because of the delightfully horrible things they do to each other. And finally, it dawned on me, well, if people had these abilities and they didn't want them, like what would they do? And I finally just decided, like, there's going to be a support group. These people
Oh.
don't want these abilities. They didn't ask for them. They're not going to go save the universe. They want to be average people. Like, why has this responsibility been thrust on them? And so there's a basically a superhero support group where these people are coming to grips with, kind of a second puberty and one they don't want. And so it was kind of a little bit of drawing on, the idea of Alcoholics Anonymous, a little bit of coming out of the closet. I have in my first superhero book, the main character is gay, but I don't really address it until it's very obvious that he's gay.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't really a plot point for him coming out. I didn't want a coming out story. That's someone else's book to write. I hate reading them, but
it's not the only plot there is for these poor characters.
yeah, like can they just be gay and be happy at the end? You know, after they fight villainy and save the world, like how hard is that? And so I actually got to tell a coming out story in the romance piece, because the very first line is, "Hi, my name is Kevin, and I'm a child of Nostradamus." And it's set up like it's the first time he's admitted to himself, or that he's admitted it out loud. So I got to kind of draw on some weird inspiration I wasn't kind of expecting. And it is, you know, we all think if we had superpowers tomorrow, we'd be like, you know, where we have our underwear on the outside of our pants and we'd be fighting crime. But what about those people who just like, no?
Yeah.
So
Depends on personality.
yeah, and so it was a very different type of character to write. It was a very different story to write, and craft-wise, I needed to, you know, really kind of explore this. But I was super like stoked that I was like a superhero support group. Of course, this is going to exist.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I got way too excited by that, and it's such a minor plot point, but I think a lot of people who are fan of superheroes will be like, oh yeah, there might be people who don't want this.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that was I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that one.
Yes. Well, so by this sort of transitions me into my next question, which is, do you have any future books that are in the works or that are coming out? And does the support group pop back up in any of them?
So there's so much yes to all of this. So currently I'm working on the sequel to my superhero, my first series, the Night Quartet. I'm writing, oh, maybe I have more books in that than I thought. So, and that's going to be the more sci-fi adventure one. And that's happening. It'll probably be out March or April. I'm working at a pretty brisk pace for a change. But the story that comes out next is the superhero Beneath the Mask.
Ooh.
That comes out on February 14th, and it is my first foray into romance. So I'm excited and way nervous because romance readers, they scare me.
Yeah, there's some heavy hitters for anybody that is a romance fan out there. There are some pretty good seasoned superhero romance authors involved, so the pressure is on to deliver.
Yeah. And you know you're going to be in this book with these other names, and you're like, I don't want them to shame me. So
they won't. They're kind people.
They'll just judge me quietly.
They'll just raise an eyebrow when they get to the end of your story and be like,
suddenly I won't be invited to anyone's parties. And so this story was actually the precursor to, I wanted a story that focused on the romance. So I do have a very much a romance. It's probably a 4-book series. And the support group is actually going to, it took place in Chicago in the short story, but they actually wind up moving to a city in New York where all the superheroes are not superheroes, but people with abilities are going, partly because some of them are dangerous. They want to be around their own kind. The temperature in the rest of the world is not very favorable. So they're going there, and the 2 characters are actually going to start a support group there for the people that aren't adjusting well. And so I'm going to keep that same theme going. And the villain is a real estate developer. I know that sounds stupid. It's super high-tech real estate developer. which I realize might also be the plot of multiple Superman movies. Maybe I'll change that.
I feel like it's a relatable villain though, because there's a lot of recent real estate developments where I'm just like, curse you! Why have you come here? No.
And so that series, I wanted to go very hard into romance. I want it to be. I already have the titles. I have the occupations of the people involved. I have the loose story that happens, which is actually you see where like my timeline is so screwing up with people. My first series, the sequel to it, is 5 years later, and the romance series will slide right into that 5 years.
Ooh.
So I'm writing things out of chronological order because it's not necessary to read them in order, but I'll eventually get to it. I'm still percolating on some technical things that I don't know if I'm a good enough writer yet to handle what I want to do. So we'll get there.
There's time, and then it practice.
I've got nothing but time. Soon.
Drafts.
If not this year, definitely next year.
Excellent. Well, let me ask you the next question about where to start with your books. Would you recommend readers start with the prequel books first, or should they start with the mainline series and then work their way back?
I have 100% developed it in a way that you can read them whichever way your fancy is. You will, if you read one versus the other, you'll notice references, but they are more like Easter eggs than necessary knowledge. So I personally would go with the Nighthawks first, but some people like to read chronologically. So, and you could do it and it will make perfect sense either way. I did it very intentionally because I'm bending genre a little bit. I didn't want people to be like, ugh, have to read about the 40s to understand this. No. But the superhero romance one is a complete standalone, but if you read it in the continuity, it doesn't change anything. It's kind of like the first Iron Man movie. It's a fine movie, but boom, here's the rest of the MCU.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't end the world. It doesn't really. The stakes are high enough for itself, but it's not like you must read it. It's like, it's more like, if you enjoy it, then here's more of the stuff.
There's no moment of Endgame where you're like, oh God, now I need to go watch 23 movies to understand this plot.
Yeah.
No.
I did not watch all of the MCU movies before I watched Infinity War. But after watching it, I enjoyed going back and being like, oh, wow. Like, I didn't watch Doctor Strange until afterwards because I thought Doctor Strange was going to be terrible. But then he was so cool in that giant team-up movie that I was like, yeah, I'll watch way more of you.
And that movie was kind of my shock. Like, I don't want to watch a movie about Doctor Strange, but I'll watch that movie about Doctor Strange.
And you can bet now I'm like, magic in the MCU? Magic in any superhero stuff anywhere? I'll read it. I'll watch it.
I keep debating if I want to go with that in my series so that I can go down like the urban fantasy road. But I feel my reader base, they're willing to go to 1940s. They're willing to read science fiction smut. I don't know if they're willing to make the leap to magic.
Yeah, it's like you have to really be committed and they really have to want it. Otherwise, it's like, oh no, I'm skipping all these.
And I even thought about doing it kind of like Thor, where it's not really magic, it's just technology so advanced you don't understand it. But
Yep.
Then I'm going to have to try and understand it.
Yep. Eventually, someone's going to ask the questions and they're going to be like, why aren't you giving me these answers? Because I don't want to give you them.
Yeah, the thing that gives them all powers is just commonly referred to as the Nostradamus effect. What is it? No one knows.
No one knows. I think sometimes it's better to do that than to try to explain something, because one famous example for me is the series by Brian K. Vaughan. It was called Why the Last Man. If anybody has not read it, like, I own them all. They're fantastic. You can find them probably anywhere. But he has a plague that takes out all of the men except for two, the main character and then his pet monkey, who also happens to be a male monkey. And for the whole series, he gives you like 3 different things that could possibly be the reason for this giant plague. And then at the very end, everyone was expecting him to tell you which one it was. But then the charm of it for me was he let you decide which one you believed it was, because he didn't want to just be like, well, the other two, if you were fans of the other 2 reasons, sorry, it was this one all along. So in the end, it's like, yeah, it's what you believe. So I'm definitely a fan of that sort of approach, where it's like sometimes not explaining is much better, because your readers, they're intelligent and they're smart. They'll figure out what they want it to be, and they'll come up with way better things than you could probably come up with. And that's definitely true in my case.
I try to think back to like the original Night of the Living Dead. How did those zombies get made? Well, there's a news broadcast that's saying that there was a comet that fell, and that's all the inkling they give you. And then I read a Planet of the Dead Planet, Dead Universe. Zombie Nation. Completely different. In the first book, it's just zombies have existed. Done. That's the end of that story. Like, here they are. They destroyed the world. And then in book 3, he explains it. And basically, it involves a black hole, cancer, and a giant vacuum. And I read this and I was like, this is such complete and utter garbage that I wish I could bleach my brain and forget your plot points.
Yeah, so you never want to go too far. Like, you never want to, you don't want to do something that you can't undo for the reader, because you'll end up with that.
It's like Captain America got the super serum. Do I need to know about the scientist who started the research and read all the paperwork? No.
No, I don't want to. No, don't make me.
So now that we've said it, Marvel will come out with a movie about it.
Oh boy. No. Oh, Marvel. No, don't do it. Please, if you're listening, don't. Just don't. It's a joke.
I'll call Kevin Feige later and just be like, look, buddy.
Oh, goodness. Well, let me ask you, this was technically my second to last question for you.
Okay.
Is there, and it's an open-ended question, is there anything that I have not asked you, that we have not talked about, that you would like to touch upon and throw out there for the listeners and the world?
So I'm going to completely shamelessly plug. So Franklin's in charge of Behind the Mask at Superhero Fiction. I am one of the co-hosts for Geekorama with TL Heinrich. I guess you would say we're like the sister podcast. I don't know what you would say. But if you're a fan of like geek trivia and fans of superhero and geekery, definitely come give it a listen, because literally that's all Trish and I ever seem to talk about. So if you like comic books, you'll most likely like this. And yeah, we're in our second season as well. So
oh yeah, and it's like for anybody, as to add a little more description too, It's sort of like listening in on like a very nerdy deep dive into different subjects. So each sort of episode of their podcast is like focused around a certain thing. And then of course, it can go all over the place depending on what rabbit holes you go down, depending on actors and stories and writers and whatnot. But it's like, it's so fun. So if you're looking for anything to listen to just like scratch the itch of listening to just analysis and thoughts on different pop culture, like definitely give it a listen.
And we like our most downloaded episode was our favorite iteration of actor to play Batman.
Oh,
not who you think it would be. And then I'm super stoked for the next one we're recording. It's because it's February, so we're going to do all romance related stuff. It's going to be our favorite superhero couples, and then our episode after are going to be our favorite superhero ships that never happened.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
And sneak peek, Professor X and Magneto secretly engaged.
They're, it's within the realm of possibilities.
When Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen took that photo of them kissing, I was like, nothing about like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. I finally got my, oh, I knew it. They've been in a relationship this whole time. They are just mom and dad bickering.
With a bunch of children.
Yeah, with a whole lot of children. So
many.
Yeah, I love that for really not the right reason.
This is why fan fiction is so fun sometimes, because what they would never do, somebody has done, and you can go find it.
So yeah, that's my shameless plug for superhero fiction and Geekorama.
Yes. So anybody that is listening that wants more, there's a lot, so you can go binge. So check it out.
We're getting close to like our 60th episode.
Oh my gosh. Oh
yeah.
So much. Excellent. Well, let me have you give us the wrap up of where readers can find you on the internet if you want to be found, and where can they find your books, your short stories, and all that jazz.
So probably the easiest place to find me, my hub for everything, is if you go to childrenofnostradamus.com. It's all my superhero stuff. I way more develop my superhero world online. And you can find me Facebook, email, newsletter, all that stuff through there. But if you want actual books to read, Amazon, just Jeremy Flagg. I'm there. I'm the superhero author, Jeremy Flagg, not the religious self-help Jeremy Flagg.
The superhero help, Jeremy Flagg.
Yeah. Don't want people to mistake those two.
Yeah, Jeremy Flagg. For anybody that's just listening, it's Flagg, and you'll know because you'll see all the superhero stuff on the covers when you see it.
Yeah, it's kind of obvious.
Yes. Well, that's all that I got, I believe. So
I survived.
You survived. It was a success. So there we go. There's one person on my list of people that I want on the show that now is on the show. So there we go. We're off to a good start this year.
Next, I keep just dropping all the names of people I want to get on the show.
Oh, geez. If there's anybody out there that's listening that's high profile, you're probably on our list, and we're probably gonna beg you because we want to talk to you. So
Brandon Sanderson is just sitting around listening to superhero podcasts.
Oh, jeez. If he was, Brandon Sanderson, such a fan. So I could go on. I won't go on because I'm at the end. But if you're listening, thank you. For everybody else listening, I'll wrap this one up before I get into trouble. I just want to thank you all. If you liked this episode of Behind the Mask, just be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our future episodes. As always, I just want to thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you all so much. Whether or not you're new to the podcast, I appreciate it. So without anything else said, I will see you all next time.
Bye.